Strangely strange but oddly normal.
Hi, my name's John Downs and welcome to episode 3 of On the Track. We're here in my local pub, the Farmer's Arms in Walsall, North Devon, where the pub regulars are showing their support for the 5 intrepid explorers who are presently in the high grassland savannas of northern Guyana.
Keep the home fires burning while your hearts are yearning, though your lads are far away, they dream of home. There's a silver lining through the dark cloud shining. Turn the dark cloud inside out till the boys come home.
It's good to be back in England again. I'm here in the local pub, the Farmer's Arms, and you'll be hearing more about my adventures a bit later on in this programme.
But first I'd like to introduce you to one of the cryptozoological animals which has intrigued me most over the past 20 or 30 years. This is a Barbary lion, and it is part of an international breeding project based here at Port Lympne Zoo in Sussex. This was the original lion, the original king of beasts, and it is best known culturally for being the creature which was imported in huge numbers by the ancient Romans, who used them as part of perverted gladiatorial displays in the arenas. It was one of 3 large carnivores which were once found here in the remote Atlas Mountains of Morocco. The Atlas bear, though some people consider it to be a separate species, was probably just the smallest subspecies of the brown bear. It was strangely ginger in colour, and was the only bear species ever to be found in Africa in historic times. The last known specimen was killed by hunters in 1870. However, to the present day there are still intriguing reports which suggest that this tantalising species may still survive in the wilder corners of the Atlas Mountains. The Barbary leopard is a strangely stocky big cat, although many people believe that it is extinct in the wild. Some experts believe that there may be as many as 250 left. And our friend, the Barbary lion, which is where we came in. The last known wild specimen was shot in the Atlas Mountains in 1922, but the species has survived. The story of its survival is a strange and interesting one. For thousands of years, the lion has been considered to be the king of beasts. This is mildly ironic, as they're incredibly lazy creatures who let their women do all the hunting for them and spend most of their day asleep. However, from classical times onwards, kings and emperors have always wanted lions in their personal menageries. The King of Morocco, in the middle of the 20th century, was no exception. He had a magnificent bride in his zoo at Rabat. He gave some of his lions as a gift to another monarch, the Emperor Haile Selassie I of Ethiopia. Haile Selassie was particularly pleased to accept them into his royal menagerie because one of his titles was the biblical one, the Lion of Judah. The Ethiopian monarchy was overthrown in 1975, and Haile Selassie and many of his family were murdered. Coincidentally, one of his great-nephews worked for the CFZ for some years. However, that, like so many things, is another story. The lions from the Ethiopian royal menagerie ended up in a travelling circus in South Africa, where they were rescued some years ago by a scientist who realised what they were, the nearest thing to purebred Barbary lions that were left in the world. So, the species has been saved. There are Barbary leopards in some of the zoos of the world. But could the Atlas bear survive as well? From recent eyewitness testimony, it seems that it is certainly a possibility. And in the not-too-distant future, the CFZ intend to mount an expedition to the High Atlas to try to find out the truth, once and for all, for ourselves. Whilst on the subject of big cats, last month we brought you what seemed on the face of it to be very exciting news about the survival of the South China tiger. However, when we showed you this image, we did warn you that certain skeptics across the world, including some at the CFZ, believed that this had been created using a program like Photoshop. Well, sadly it looks like we were right. This image has surfaced recently from a Chinese New Year calendar, and it's not really too much of a leap of faith to see how it could have been manipulated into this. Close, but no cigar. But there is still hope for the wild population of the South China tiger, and indeed the CFZ have been interested in this species for many years. We have an upcoming project about it, which we will be talking about in a future edition of On the Track. Still in China, this footage surfaced recently. It purports to show a family of unknown creatures described as lake monsters in Lake Tianqi near to the Korean border. There have been reports of monsters in Lake Tianqi for centuries, and we at the CFZ actually believe that they exist. However, these pictures seem to show nothing more than ducks. However, this footage from Lake Hannas does appear to show something interesting and probably unknown to science. There have been reports of giant fish from this lake for many years, and it has been suggested that they are a type of salmon known as a huchen, but one that has grown to monstrous proportions and that is, at least according to eyewitnesses, bright red in colour. It is like we've always said, you don't have to imagine a Jurassic Park scenario to have a monster. A 30-foot long bright red salmon is quite monstrous enough for us. But now I think it's time to go back to Richard for news of the Guyana expedition. He arrived back at the CFZ headquarters in North Devon late last night on the 28th of November. And after a decent meal and a good night's sleep, one of the first things he did this morning was to go up to the local pub to thank the landlord and landlady, Alan and Jenny Lindsay, for their support while he was away. Not to anyone's surprise, they had a load of questions to ask.
Right, unfortunately it was just so hot out there and the rains hadn't come that we couldn't get to the lake where the giant anaconda had been seen. The river was too low, it was too far to go over the land, so we couldn't go to the lake to see the monster anaconda, but we found out a load of other stuff about all sorts of other creatures like the water tiger and the die-die, which is similar to Bigfoot, and this race of weird little red-faced pygmies.
I have smaller ones, bush people call them.
Bush people?
Yeah. Smaller ones. Their face are red.
The little red-faced man.
And they call them bush people?
Yeah, bush people.
Bush people.
So
What do you think the bush people are? Do you think they're people or are they animals?
I can say they're people.
People, yeah.
Is the red face, is that painted on or?
No, I think that is natural.
Natural.
Have you seen the?
Yes. They do appear to people.
The bush people?
That's tobacco.
Right.
They're for tobacco.
They eat tobacco?
They eat it?
They smoke it.
They smoke it?
They smoke it or eat it.
So do you lay out an offering and they come?
Yeah, they pick it up.
Yeah. Do people ever try and sort of talk to them or call them with tobacco? Or is it mostly people?
Well, they won't talk.
Don't talk.
They don't.
When was the last time you saw one of the little people?
Around here you could hear them walking, whistling. You can hear them. But you can't see them. Unless if you trouble something that belongs to them, then they will go for you.
What kind of things belong to them?
Like Sometimes a big tree like this is their house, no?
Right.
If you cut it down.
Yeah. We met many witnesses who'd seen these tiny race of people about 3 to 3.5 feet tall with red faces. Some people say it was like a war paint they painted on, others seem to think it was their natural complexion, but generally they were spoken of as being naked and having these strange grins. They were always grinning, and they were interested in tobacco. They would come and take tobacco and take it away again. But they seem to be a real race of tiny people, possibly similar to Homo floresiensis. Homo floresiensis was a tiny hominid, a tiny person. The bones were found on the Indonesian island of Flores a couple of years ago. These were a race of tiny humans about 3 to 3.5 feet tall.
So you never saw any of the anaconda?
We saw tracks of anacondas in the swamps, but ordinary sized anacondas. We talked to a man who'd seen a 30-foot anaconda, but we couldn't get out to the lake where the real monster anaconda was. But we're hoping to get out there next year. The river was just too low and it's too far to go over land, and we couldn't get hold of a plane at such short notice. That was really, really frustrating.
Would your research so far suggest, Richard, that the anaconda might be becoming extinct? Is it a suffering species?
Thankfully, the anaconda seems to be hearty and hale. There are good populations of them throughout most of South America where there's a decent amount of water. It's just that we went at the wrong time of year. It was way too dry, and the rains, they call the Christmas rains, were late in coming. So the anaconda, as far as we know, isn't in danger. But very little is known about them. We don't know how big they grow or how old they get. Virtually nothing is known about how anaconda biology. There's loads of blanks in anaconda biology, and the most interesting thing to me is the giant ones. How big do they get, and why do certain individuals get to such huge sizes?
How did you manage in like in a hot climate where you was?
Well, myself and Paul Rose both suffered from heat stroke. It was the hottest place I've ever been to, and there was no shade whatsoever out on the grassland, and it was completely unrelenting for hours and hours and hours. And at one time I waded into a swamp and hid under a tree just to try and get a bit of shade, but I was collapsing through heat stroke, and Paul wasn't doing much better. On another occasion we were going up a mountain to see this cave burial, and Lisa, who was like the archaeologist and photographer, fell off the mountain and damaged her thumb and her shoulder and her foot. She thought she broke her thumb, but she was like hobbling around for the rest of the expedition.
There's only time in this edition of On the Track to scratch the surface of what the expedition has achieved. We are still only beginning to edit the video, and we have 5 or 6 hours more video from 3 cameras to go through. Early in the new year, we hope that we'll be able to present you with a full-length documentary presenting all the expedition's findings. But for now we must leave the Guyana team and go to our monthly roundup of new and rediscovered animals. This slightly peculiar looking shark has turned up in the deep sea filtration systems off Keyhole Point, Hawaii. A small shark that is described as looking similar to an alligator follows the discovery 2 months previously of a creature that looked like a hybrid between an octopus and a squid. It wasn't us who described it as looking like an alligator, but somebody from an American newspaper, and we have to say that we can't see anything even slightly crocodilian in its appearance. The shark was sucked up from seawater over a kilometre below the surface into a deep seawater tank designed to save specimens from the ocean's depths that inadvertently make their way into the pumping system. Luckily, the shark survives the ordeal and doesn't seem to be any the worse for it. A new species of peccary, a South American forest pig, has been discovered by Dutch biologist Mark van Roosmalen. He was actually searching for undiscovered species of monkeys when he saw it in the jungle. Local people in the Rio Arapiana Basin call the animal Caetu mundi, which means great peccary that lives in pairs. Van Roosmalen is at the moment being persecuted by both the Brazilian government and their paymasters, who appear to be international logging companies. Just take one look at him. He either looks like a Hawkwind roadie or one of the CFZ, so he's got to be a good bloke. Good luck, mate, and don't let the bastards grind you down. Our last new species this month provides a cautionary tale for those zoologists who think that they know everything about the natural world. Biologist Jake S. Ellerton from the University of Kansas was surveying forest life on the island of Mindoro in the Philippines when a local guide told him about a strange species of bat he'd seen in the area. He described the bat in great detail, but the scientist politely explained to him that such a bat did not exist. He was proved wrong, however, a few days later when he happened upon the new species of bat exactly had been described by the guide. Well guys, that's about it for this episode. In fact, it's about it for this year, because episode 4 won't be coming out until January 2008. Looking back, it's been a pretty good year here at the CFZ, and I'm particularly proud of what the Guyana expedition achieved. I think they did magnificently. I just want to say thank you to Richard and to Graham, who both did extra camera work on this episode, and to Alan and Jenny at the Farmer's Arms, who've been absolutely magnificent and let us take the pub over while we were doing the filming. So guys, until next year, be seeing you.